Some immediate thoughts this Thursday, November 20th, on the draw that has just taken place for the 2026 World Cup playoffs. We will play on March 26th against Northern Ireland, most likely in Bergamo, and then, if we win, the possible final away. Between Wales and Bosnia, we will find out who our opponent will be. Basically, how did it go? It went pretty well if we look at it from a practical standpoint, especially in terms of the difference in value and talent between the two teams, or even the three teams, if you like. So, if we consider Northern Ireland, Bosnia, and Wales, these are teams that, on paper, are generally considered to be weaker, but that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. In other words, the draw gives us moderate confidence. It gives us hope. We can try to avoid a disgrace that, in my opinion, would be a definitive point of no return. Not qualifying for the World Cup once again for the third time would be chaos and epic disaster. Gravina would probably still remain in his position because the presidents elected him, and so they bear the responsibility for this situation. Moreover, in his latest interviews, Gravina still pretends nothing is wrong. He says that every time Italy is eliminated from a tournament, people tend to look for someone to blame, the coach, the captain, the player, but never the president. No, the only one to blame is him. He is the culprit. He is the one who has sunk the system. I would also like to point out to Gravina the latest situation involving the president of the Italian Referees Association, who has been referred for disciplinary action. I would like to hear his comment on this because, you see, he pretends nothing is wrong about everything, even things that in another country would lead to suspension or at least a commissioner being appointed. Everything is fine here because he has the wind at his back. Going back to our opponents, we could still advance despite Gravina. We could even advance if Gravina or the Minister of Sport, Abodi, were playing, both of whom are responsible for a collapse, for an unprecedented disaster. Because in any case, until March, you'll have the opportunity to find this famous formula by getting some players back into top condition. Being at a stage where we would have entered the Champions League in its most important phase, the season will have allowed all the mechanisms to be fine-tuned. And let's be honest, if we look at it from a technical standpoint, Northern Ireland has a few talented players and nothing more. Wales and Bosnia could pose a challenge, especially Wales with the passionate home crowd if we reach the final. However, I would always recommend focusing on one thing at a time, because when we played against Macedonia, we were so worried about facing Ronaldo's Portugal in the final that we played that match terribly and decided to get it over with right there in Palermo. So we are not in a position to make long-term plans to say, yes here, no there, no here, yes there, I'll do well here. We simply can't afford that. We are not the authoritative world champion federation that we once were. So I expect controversies, friction, pressure, situations that will arise far beyond the limits of improvisation, because we'll go even further. We'll try to cling to anything. Just now I was listening to people saying that it won't be a problem to combine lunch and dinner to call up the players since the world is... But that's not the issue. We don't have to blindly go along with everything. And we don't have to always say yes to everything. The problem is that schedules should be planned in advance, and you should avoid organizing things far away and from Italy to make the schedules even more complicated. I feel nostalgic for the journalism of the past, and for this reason, I must be grateful. And I have a deep and sincere memory of my editor, Mimo Morassi, the editor who hired me back in 1989 at Corriere dello Sport and who has since passed away. I shared a remembrance on my social media. It's quite a sad moment, not only because of the loss of a true friend, a great professional, a great editor, but also because it makes you realize the difference between now and the past. Now everyone talks. They butcher the subjunctives, they're quick to grovel, to roll out the red carpet, but what's the point? Can we do the internship now? You need to do the job of a journalist, not a bag carrier. Let the federation handle it, otherwise go work for the federation. So even if, despite everything, with Gravina as centre forward and Abodi as left winger, if Gattuso were to pick the other 9 correctly, even against Northern Ireland, I think we could go far. I was just thinking about the fact that, in any case, these are matches that You find yourself in a situation where there is only something to lose and absolutely nothing to gain. So, in this kind of scenario, technique and tactics really will not matter. Only your clear superiority, specifically in terms of the human resources you have available, will make a difference. What matters is your mindset. And here I trust Gattuso that he can get into their heads that he was well received. Regardless of the last shameful match against Norway, which is part of our system, I trust that he can get into their heads and that the team spirit will prevail, that the group will come together again and not get caught up in other things that make you play with fear. The fear of making mistakes, because that will be our biggest problem. The problem, from my point of view, if it were just technical and they asked me for an opinion right now, I would say even in Wales or in Bosnia, and especially in Wales with a very heated atmosphere, possibly in the final, we are in a position to secure this blessed or cursed ticket. But it's everything else beyond the technical aspect that worries me. I'm concerned about the superficial words. Superficial management, the absent FEGC, Gravina, who tells fairy tales as president of the FEGC and hasn't realized that the real problem with Italian football is him, a minister who is absent and busy with other things. These are what worry me. These are the things that concern me, the steps leading up to it, the management of certain matters. Very often, what have the great coaches taught you? That you arrive at the event so strong from the mental point of view that even if you are technically stronger, you've already, so to speak, dominated with just a look, the famous look in the tunnel. I'm not saying that we are or should go back to the football of the past because everything has changed and that's impossible. But I do expect a kind of management reminiscent of the Italy of the past. Italy as world champions, Italy that knew how to come together, that didn't stir up controversy, and above all, didn't look for excuses to justify certain things without taking responsibility. Responsibility that belongs only to those who have brought Italian football to this state. And as you can see, I will keep saying that it's always someone else's fault. I asked Gravina to give me a comment on the ongoing disciplinary action against the president of the Italian Association. Referees who will have 15 days to submit their counter-arguments and everything else. But if the main charge, so to speak, let's wait for the end of this movie, because it's yet another story. The pressures on appointments, let's not add that to what has already happened. So after the reimbursements, after the unpaid payments, after everything that has happened, Gravina kept saying everything was fine. The problem is everything would be fine if he weren't the president of the FIGC. Anyway, I await your opinions and judgments on the playoff semifinals and finals. We'll see each other again soon because today is Thursday and luckily the league is back. Luckily we'll be able to focus on other things and fortunately we're on a different path compared to the one we've had to walk over the past 2 weeks. Bye.